Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are going to start jumping into Java and understanding the basic structure of it so that we can know what it is moving forward and we can start getting into uh, more of the heavier topics that we need to cover to get you started. So, let's go ahead and jump in. So, I mentioned this briefly in a previous video, but basically, what you need to know is that your computer does not understand any letters, and it only understands two numbers. So, that is 0 and 1, and that is actually what we call binary. So, like how you see the letters on the screen right now, your computer basically does not understand any of it. And all of this that you're seeing to the computer is zeros and ones. So the computer sees currently zeros and ones, and you are seeing what is displayed on the computer right now. So basically, any code that is created has to be translated to zeros and ones for your computer to understand. And different languages will use different ways to translate your code to zeros and ones. So, the first way of translating is having interpreted language. So, the code is basically translated line by line as it's running. So, it doesn't create like a separate file um, that can be run after it's translated. It just runs it and translates as the code runs. And obviously, this is slower because think about if you have a massive program with over 200 lines of code, that might take some time. And errors will show as the program runs. So, for interpreted languages like Python, JavaScript, and Ruby are going to be interpreted languages. So, if you have some background with Python, that is an interpreted language. Your code was read line by line as it was running, and it would stop when it ran or came across a error. Now, with Java, Java is a compiled language, meaning the code is translated together before it runs. And it's all translated and it's placed into what's called an executable file. And that executable file will run all at once, making it quicker, and it will find your errors during compilation, basically. So, Java, C, C++, those are all going to be your compiled languages. So, yes, in this course, we are working with a compiled language where it will create an executable file that would run, and that is how our code will display. So, making that hop from Python to Java, again, many people typically start off with the Java language because it is simpler. So, if that was you, to make a connection, Python is an interpreted language, meaning the code was run line by line. Java is a compiled language, meaning all the code runs at once and then it all runs together, not separately line by line. Python used indentations when you're writing your code to create a structure, where Java uses braces to create a structure. And you will see that moving forward. So that's just a little piece to help you connect where we're moving if you started with Python and now you're going to Java. So, Java programs, they're going to be organized into classes. So every program that you're going to create has to have a class, at least one. You can have more, but you have to have at least one. And that class name must match the file name. So if you name the file test.java, the class has to be test. If you name it intro.java, the class name has to be intro. So it must match whatever you're naming the file. So how do you create a Java file? You basically use the file extension .java. That is telling your computer that is a Java file. Now, again, the name of the file can be whatever you want it to be. Typically, you would want to give the file name something that deals with what the file is. So, for example, if you're doing a management system, you might do management.java. If you're doing a video game, you would do game.java. So basically, you would name the file whatever you are working with to kind of let you know what is in the file. But you basically just give it a name and put .java at the end, and that will tell your computer that it is a Java file. So here is a brief example of a Java file. So this is the standard structure that you would have. So you see here, we have public class my program. That's the class that we were just talking about on the last page. And you see its name, my program. At the top, you see it says myprogram.java. So that is the name of the file if you were to look for it in the computer. The class matches exactly the uppercase and everything, no spacing. It matches exactly as it states in the actual file name. So the class name and the file name are the same. The only thing that's missing from the class name is the .java, which you do not need to specify. You just need to do the file name and not the file extension when you are naming the class. .java is a file extension. My program is the file name. So the file name and the class name must be the same, which you see here. And under that is another component you need to run every Java file, which we will get into in a second. So to understand briefly what a class is, we will deep dive into classes a little later on after you kind of understand the basics of Java. So don't worry, this is just a brief introduction so you can kind of at least understand what you're working with so far. So a class is like a building block of the Java program. It's a container that's going to hold a bunch of lines of code, and it's basically like an organizer. So just think of it as a master folder that's going to hold all of the code or the tasks that you want the specific program to run. So it's just basically used for creating structure, but it's also holding all the code together so it knows that it's all belongs together and all works together. So that's basically briefly what a class is. So when you're working with your Java file, you will create a class, and that class is then going to hold your lines of code that you will be working with. Now, if you noticed, in those screenshots, there were curly braces. So curly braces are what's used to define the block of code. So that is actually the, I guess you could say, the literal container. The opening curly brace and the closing curly brace would be considered the container. You will then place all of your lines of code inside of the curly braces. It has to be inside of the curly braces. And the curly braces are going to create what are called blocks, which is basically groups of code together or groups of statements together. And they're going to place them all in one place so you know that, hey, all of these lines of code belong together. All of them need to work and run at the same time together. That is why curly braces are important. You must include a open and a closed brace, or you will have problems with your code. So this is a very, very, very important step. So your curly braces are typically used when you are working with classes, which we saw in the previous example, methods, which if you see here, right here, we have this public static void main. That is a method. We will get into that in a second. But if you look, it says here, public class hello world class block, and then public static void main method block. So it is used to pretty much create or group your code together. So curly braces are a very important component that you need to remember and utilize in this series. So getting into that main method. Your main method is another very, 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 very important. I cannot stress it enough. It is a very important topic. You basically want to memorize this exactly how you see it. Exactly how you see it in that box is exactly how you need to remember it. Even with the capital S, you have to, like, to the T. Everything you see has to match. This is important. So this is a main method, and this is how your Java program understands how to begin running. So it's telling your computer where it needs to start running the code. And that is basically saying, hey, come here, I'm going to get this program started. So it needs to know where to start. And this is where it's going to know where to start. So it has to be typed exactly to the T, like this, every time you code. So in some IDEs, they will automatically include it for you, or it will automatically be pre-typed, or well, now they're automatically included on many IDEs, but it's still good to know that this is how it should look every time, including the capital S in string. So if you make that lowercase in the parentheses, it will not work. It has to be capital, because Java is what we call case sensitive. So we will get into that later, but it is case sensitive, meaning that how it is exactly how it needs to be to work. If it's not, you will have problems. So this is the main method. This is one of the most important things that you need to remember along with classes, and this generally will go directly in a class. So here are the components of your main method, just to kind of give you an idea. You'll be working with it, so just so you understand what's going on and what it is. So the first part of the main method is public. Public means that it's accessible to the JVM. So remember, the JVM is our Java virtual machine, which is responsible for running the code. So when you say in public, you're saying, hey, JVM, you can run me. That's basically what it's saying. Static means that you're going to run this without creating an object, meaning you don't need to have an object to run this. Now, we haven't gotten to objects. We will in the future, but just know that this will allow you to run without creating an object, and this will make more sense when we get to objects. Void means no value. It's voided. It's not returning anything. And when it's saying that, technically what you place in it can return something, but the actual method, which is the main method, is not returning any values to you. It's just running the other methods that may be within it. Main is the method name. This is the JVM starting point. So when your JVM sees main, it knows, hey, this is where I need to go to run the code. It's not going to go anywhere else. You may have 500 lines of code, but whatever is in your main method is what will run. So that is very important. So if it's not in your main method, it will not run. If it is in your main method, it will run. So this is why you need to remember these components. And string args, args is short for arguments, is meaning command line arguments. So again, it's just basically saying input that may be entered, and it's just basically connecting your computer and the code together. So that overall is the components of a main method. Now again, some of this is going to be foreign to you. It will make sense as we get deeper into the concepts of Java, but you still need to know what it is, because from day one you need to work with it. So this is just a brief breakdown of what it is. So just think of your main method as the front door of a home. the JVM is going to knock on the front door or knock on the main method. So whatever is inside of the main method is going to start running when the JVM knocks on the door. So just think of it like that. Basically, what's going to be inside is the code. Code is going to be inside of the main method. The JVM is going to knock and say, hey, what's inside? And whatever's inside is going to run and show up on your computer. And that is why the main method is important. Anything that is not inside of the main method is not going to run. Even if it's in that file, if it's not in the main method, it's not going to run. So you need to make sure everything you write in your code is connected back to the main method in some way, shape, or form. So again, what's the importance of this? It's telling you where your computer is going to start running. So again, I cannot stress this more. This is one of the most important things that you need to know, recognize, and understand. Anything in this method is going to run. If it is not in here, it is not. So that is the main key I need you to take away from today's lesson. All right. So now that we know what a main method is, now we know what a class is. You have a class. Inside of the class is going to be the main method. Inside of the main method are going to be statements. Okay? Same as in the class. So statements are going to be in the main method. Statements are going to be in the class. But basically, a statement is a single instruction that your computer is going to execute. These statements will have to end with a semicolon. So just like in English, when you write a sentence, they end in periods. In Java's case, they will end in semicolons. And this is just important as the main method. I cannot stress it enough. I have seen it so many times where people are learning Java, their code will break if they forget to put that semicolon. And I have seen people spend hours trying to fix their code just for the problem to be a semicolon. So, you definitely need to know that any instruction that you are writing in Java, every time it is going to have to end in a semicolon, unless it is a class or a method or a conditional statement. It has to end in a semicolon. So statements will typically run top to bottom. So for example, if you have 5 statements, it's going to start at the first statement and it's going to go top to bottom. So technically, when you're writing your code, if you want a certain thing to happen first, then you need to write it in that order. But basically, that's what a statement is. It's just a single instruction saying, hey, do this, hey, do that. That's what it is. So here are 2 types of statements. On the left, you have a declaration, and on the right, you have an assignment. Now, obviously, with assignment, that means you're assigning some sort of value to something. On the left, a declaration. That's just basically saying, hey, I want to create this. I'm declaring that this is that, and that is this. That's a declaration. An assignment is saying, I'm saying, hey, this is equal to this. It's assigning a value. It's giving it a data value, basically. And again, we haven't gotten to that just yet, but just know there's technically 2 types of statements that can be made: a declaration and an assignment. You also have method call statements. And those will be calling your methods, which again we have not covered. So you can call methods with a statement, and then you have control statements. Okay, your control statements do not technically end in the semicolons, but it is telling your code what to do. So it is an instruction, and it's telling, hey, this is what I needed to do. So again, we'll get deeper into all of these topics. We're not there yet, but basically you have declaration statements, you have assignment statements. These are your 2 primary that we're going to be working with to get started. Then you have your method call statements, and then you have your control statements, which we'll get into a little later on. Okay, now that we kind of covered your basic structure, comments are something that are, I would say it's optional. Should it be optional? No. But if you don't have them in your code, it will not make or break your code. But I would highly suggest that you use them because they will make your life easier. But comments are basically used to explain your code. So as you're writing your code, you may be trying to figure out, hey, what does this line do? A comment is like taking notes within your code. You can easily write down, hey, this line does this line does that. I need this section for this section. It's basically a way to document and help you explain the code as well as helping you organize it. So there are 3 ways to make comments. There's a single line comment, which you see there with the 2 slashes. So you do the 2 slashes and then write whatever you want. So basically, as soon as your code sees those 2 slashes, it knows it's a comment. And what you need to know what the comment is basically it's ignored by the compiler. So when it runs, it does not count as code. It just knows that, hey, we're going to ignore anything that is a comment. It's not necessary to run the code. It's just information. I don't need to worry about it. That is why it's important. So if you do not set up your comments exactly like you see in these examples, it will cause issues in your code. So you have your single line comment, 2 simple slashes. Your multi-line comment has slash and asterisk, and then you place the comment within it. So you see there's an ending on this comment as well. The first one does not require 2 slashes to end it. It's just the 2 slashes at the beginning. Write whatever you want. If you're to have, let's say, a paragraph worth of, or let's say 2 to 3 sentences worth of explanation, you'd use the multi-line comment and just make sure that you have the slash asterisk at the beginning and the asterisk slash at the end of wherever you want that to be. And your last one is the documentation comment. This comment is generally placed at the very top of your files. So basically it would be a instruction manual to your file. Like, what's included in this file? Why is this file necessary? What is this file going to be doing? What other files does this file connect to? So basically this would be your brief summary page of what your code is doing. And again, most of these are just introducing you to the concepts. I will show you what it looks like in live action code. So those are the basic components that you will work with to get started. But the next portion you need to consider is program flow. And that is basically how is your program going to be running? How does it flow? And it's going to explain, how the code runs when it runs in main. So what you need to know is in Java, your code will run line by line, top to bottom. Now, it's not being compiled line by line because it all happens together, but when your code executes, it executes line by line in order. So the order that you're writing your statements of code does matter. It goes top from bottom. So if you have task 1 under task 2, it will not work how you want it to work because obviously task 1 needs to be first. So it needs to be task 1 and then task 2. So you have to be strategic in how you're writing your code and placing your code in your Java files. Another concept you need to know is syntax. This is very important because a lot of people run into syntax errors and then they're stuck. So what is syntax? Syntax are basically rules that are going to define how the code must be written. So if your code is not written like this, basically when you go to run it, it's not going to like it. It's not going to work. So there are specific rules that are out there. Now there are a ton of syntax rules, but primarily these rules apply to keywords. So there are certain words in Java that are Java specific, meaning you can't try to use these words in other cases. It will cause issues um, if you're missing symbols. So symbols or punctuations, if you're using them wrong, it could cause issues. For example, if you don't have that semicolon to end a statement, that's going to cause an issue. So syntax is basically the rules of how you are supposed to write your code. So as I do the tutorials, you will see the expected way to write code. I will show you some issues of ways you shouldn't write code, but overall, these are the important parts that you want to worry about. So again, syntax, if you have syntax issues, you're going to run into program errors. So here are the type of errors that you will probably run across when we are going through this. So you will have your compile time errors. This is where your syntax errors come into play. Basically, something is wrong with the way you wrote your code. So it can't be translated until you fix it. So that's basically what I was talking about. If you write a statement and it's missing a semicolon, you have a compile time error. But there's a runtime error. The runtime error will be a case where your code is running. It's running just fine. The only problem is the code is not doing what you want it to do, right? So either you inputted something wrong, the logic of it doesn't make sense, and it's not executing how you thought it would, or you entered the wrong input into it. So let's say you're asking the user, hey, enter your name, and they put a number. That would cause a runtime error. Nothing was wrong with the program, but the way the program was interacted with caused a problem while it was running. Hence, it's called a runtime error. So these are the two programs or the two errors that you will have. And as we create our programs, I will show you each. And I will just show you how to kind of walk yourself out of them. But these are the two you need to know in Java. All right. So now we'll get into a few more additional concepts for you at least kind of understand the background. Java libraries. So we will be using these in our code, but just think of Java libraries as being a collection of pre-written code that you can use in your programs. And these libraries can be used for math or input and output or even data structures, which data structures in Java is a whole nother course typically that is very intense and it can get complex, but we're not worried about that. But just so you know, there are libraries that you can use. Basically, it's already created for you. All you have to do is figure out how to use them. So here are some common libraries that you will use and we will use in the course. So you see here, it starts with Java and then it has dot, whatever the library name is. So java.util, that will be used for user input, working with data, working with numbers. Java IO is for input and output. Java.lang, that is automatically imported because that contains the core components that we need to create a Java file. So you technically do not have to state java.lang. Just know that we're automatically using this library. And java.time, which is working with any dates, times, things of that nature. So we will be working with these libraries, and basically it's going to save us time and allow us to interact more with our code. You also have an import statement. So for you to use those libraries, you have to import it in your Java file at the top of the file. So again, we haven't gotten there, but basically you would say import java.util, and then in this one, it's a scanner. Again, we're not getting deep into that, but you see, as long as you say import and then give the library name, it will then add it to your code so that you can use it how you meant. Again, the libraries are large, they are complex, so I will go into them as we use them, but just know they exist. It's like free tools that you can use within your code. All right, so now we're kind of wrapping up with the overall structure. But first, here's some common mistakes that you can make, okay? So you need to watch out for this as you're creating your code. So you want to make sure that you're not missing any semicolons. You want to make sure that you always have an open and a closed curly brace. You want to make sure that you are not capitalizing or miscapitalizing. So you're not putting, you know, so something that's supposed to be capital is lowercase, and something that is not supposed to be capital is not capital. So things of that nature, because remember, it does matter in Java, and you always want to make sure that your file name does match your class name. Okay? So these are all common mistakes. And yes, the last bullet is correct. Remember, these are common mistakes. So what I'm saying is file name does not match the class name is a common mistake that people make. Not saying that you should do that, but these are all important things you want to watch out for. If your code is not running, it is probably because one of these has occurred. So just keep that in mind. This is a little cheat sheet you can refer to when you are writing your code. So the best practices you can have working with your Java files is having one class per file. Make sure your file name matches your class name, and make sure that you're indenting and formatting for clarity. Okay, so make sure that your structure looks good, it looks clean to avoid any issues. Again, all of these concepts we are discussing are going to make more sense as we get into our examples. So we have made it to the end of this lecture of covering the Java structure basics. So what are the main components of Java? What are the main features I need to be using every time I'm writing a program? What is it that I need to watch out for? So yes, we did cover a lot of information. I'm sure it is very overwhelming at first, and you may need to revisit it. And also, just keep in mind, as we're going through the lecture portions, it's just introducing the concepts we will be doing in the coding portion. So everything will start to connect once you see the example. But for me to do the example, I have to introduce you to the concept for it all to connect together. So that's basically how this series will go. I will first introduce it in a formal way, show you examples of it through lecture, and then I will show you the coding ways and go about it that route. So it'll be off on, off on, off on layout. So I'm sure you're very overwhelmed with everything we covered, and that is fine. Programming is not easy, but we are going to go through this process together. So, again, I would say revisit this video, watch it another time to kind of get these concepts down packed. And then as we start coding, all of this will begin to make sense. So until then, just make sure these main concepts we covered that you understand, you research a little bit more, and then we will come back and dive into how to do this in your code. So I will see you all in the next video.